Hello and welcome back to the double swing. We took a little bit of a break, I guess you could say, skipping Chengdu after the major, but it was quite a busy 3-week period we had around the major, making weekly shows myself and doing all these previews, so it felt good to just have a little bit of a moment to regather our thoughts, examine the scene, then come back with some fresh perspectives. That being said, the major was a bit of a disaster for us. Looking at the results, it was okay, going sort of 50% sort of success rate up until playoffs, at which point we picked nothing. That was correct. You only really get points for making the final or winning the event in your picks, and we picked 0 finalists between the two of us, which was really impressive, I thought. I know we've had our bad moments, but that was a perfect 0. I don't think we've ever managed that.
Now, considering
impressed.
what we pick 4 out of the 8 teams in the playoffs,
Yes.
and we don't hit on it. We have a 50%. I mean, if we're just thinking purely numbers here, we should at least get 1 team out of the 4 picks that we have. But
yep,
yeah,
somehow
not normal major. I don't think either.
No, it went well. It was when you looked at the playoff bracket, you immediately thought, "Oh, sick! One of the best playoff brackets we've had in years." And then certain things went wrong. And the teams we'd pick, I know we talked ourselves out of picking FaZe, which was a bit silly. Picking Na'Vi felt silly at the time, but who'd have thought that the lowest win rate team ever to win a major would go on and win a major? That was not supposed to happen. Everyone's aware of that fact, but it did, and that kind of screwed us. So it's a number of things that led to our downfall, not just a couple dodgy picks here and there. As I said, talking ourselves out of the FaZe pick. Aside from that, I don't think we could have done much about that Na'Vi prediction. That Na'Vi run to the final, as improbable as it is unrepeatable. And honestly, there's a reason every show for the next week was referring to a fluke. That was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's my fault as well. I felt like at the start of CS2, I thought Na'Vi were actually going to have a little bit of an era. I remember saying that a long time ago, and then it didn't happen. And I don't pick Na'Vi in the time that they win. I can't win. I pick teams at bad times, and I don't pick teams at good times. I need to go against myself more, probably, is what I'm learning about me.
It has been my saving grace, because the number of stupid underdog picks I make, or in some cases, just picks in general, favourite or otherwise, and that get perfectly nullified by you just going with your own gut, which seems to be just not the way a lot of the times. But speaking of your prediction that Na'Vi, it was basically, you said that because Na'Vi have Alexi B and he's such a studious IGL, it's definitely going to be them, the first team to really establish themselves in CS2, figure out the new meta, develop the way to pop smokes properly, all these timings. None of that ended up being true. And yet he still won the first major, and I'm not sure what to make of it. Are you a genius? I don't think so, because it really didn't look like it should have
It's not
worked.
even the way that I thought they would be good, I thought they would out-strategize and they'd have cool niche plays that they'd always pull off. But to be honest, it kind of did just feel as though, 1, the macro was fine, but then 2, you have JL absolutely having the tournament of his life. So, I mean, hats off to them. I mean, if he's able to get that, even coming as the primary star on this team, and now he is that for Na'Vi. So it's, I mean, shout out Na'Vi. We're not going to talk about them today, but that team is quite a threat now, especially with JL making up for what IM kind of lacks in a way.
Yeah, and I think I've got a whole detailed analysis of how I think Na'Vi should move forward. About how, honestly, I don't think the way a lot of people thought they'd be at the start is going to be the way they look going forward, especially if they're going to try to win. They are definitely going to make those hard adjustments, shifting those sort of responsibilities around. But I'll save that, I think, for the episode where we actually talk about Na'Vi. And I also did bring it up on Retake the Week last Sunday, so not this one, just gone the one before, straight after the major. I did elaborate on that, so I'm not going to do it today. Instead, I think we should get straight into the picks. This is ESL Pro League Season 19, I think we're on. Yeah, I've got a handy graphic on my screen showing 19. Groups A and B, because might as well group them up into pairs. This event takes 4 weeks. We're not going to do 4 shows. It'd get a little bit silly, I think, talking about this, and especially trying to get 2 picks out of a single group. It can be a bit awkward. I think this is the ideal way to do it. So Group A and B, I've got the first pick. I've taken a favourite, and it's Group A we're going to start with. It's FaZe. Now, FaZe somehow overperformed and underperformed at the major, which I feel is a bit silly, but the way I saw it is if they're going to make a run at this major, they have to beat Spirit in that playoff. They have to beat Spirit, and if they do, they win. Who can stop FaZe? Surely.
The game of the playoffs as well.
Yeah, oh, that game was phenomenal. I was in a Weatherspoons airport, watching it on my phone while sinking a pint of, I don't even know what at this point. It was a pint of something, waiting for my flight, which was an hour delayed. Thank you, Ryanair, by the way. Both my flights, in and out of Copenhagen, over an hour delayed. I don't know how you managed that, but it was incredible. No, so I had stuck there, not in the event. I didn't have quarterfinal tickets anyway, not expecting a quarterfinal to be the best game, but watching it play out and just going, I cannot believe I'm missing this. Like, this would be the best game to be in the arena for. And they go on and they beat Spirit. An amazing series. Great veto, great performances from the individuals. Brokey was great all playoff long, pretty much, except for the grand final. But generally, an amazing performance from the team. Great calling from Carrigan. Everything seems to be going perfectly. And yet they lose the final. And I'm watching the final in the stadium, and I feel like Carrigan's choking this. Like, especially map 3. Like, I'm not even talking about his individual performance. Like, him not shooting people, not usually much of a big deal. It was more, his calling was off. He was making the wrong reads, had the players in the wrong spots, and on top of that, couldn't hit the side of a barn. So all those things combined, it just felt like a Carrigan choke in the final, which is just like, I thought we were past this. And you beat the toughest opponent here. This should have been your major. Very disappointing for FaZe, but this event, they should be fine.
Yeah, it's also, if you're going to look at the prospect of them starting to choke, you know, I mean, the big narrative that people kept spinning was, I mean, 8 playoffs or 8 finals appearances in sort of big tier tournaments, and a couple of them are online, sure. But, you know, from the start of CS2 to now, they've still been able to maintain consistency in making it to these late stages of playoffs, make it into finals. And yeah, there maybe could be concerns about them not being able to close. But I Am Chengdu is the event we skipped over between the major and now. It's MOUZ and FaZe in the finals. And in some sense, that's, and this is something that they even said on the desk, FaZe versus FaZe Academy to a certain degree. You know, they're pulling players out of MOUZ, and these guys are developing in honestly a very similar looking structure to a certain degree as FaZe. There's some differences in the way that they want to be sort of active on the map. I think they've got more sort of set pieces. There's less independence, I feel like, on MOUZ. But in a large way, you know, FaZe dismissed the I guess the challengers in MOUZ in that final, and FaZe get themselves the like hands on a trophy coming this year. So I mean, that's really good to see for FaZe. I think they're going to be riding a little bit of that high into ESL Pro League. I don't think that they're going to be as intense, because I feel like a lot of teams in ESL Pro League just kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit, experiment, or just sort of coast to a certain degree. But Group A is probably the most stacked group we have in ESL Pro League. So they actually can't afford to have that happen. Like, if you think about some of the teams that are in this event or within their group, a very impressive looking Imperial when we got to the major, Eternal Fire as sort of contenders and the best Turkish Counter-Strike has looked in a very long time. Astralis under Device at Chengdu looked pretty solid. You've got VP in there. You've got SAW as well as another like sort of budding team that came into really good form at the start of this year. So I don't think they can afford to be sort of lackadaisical. So that's my only concern with FaZe coming into ESL Pro League, is that the Pro League relax mode might engage to a slight degree, but they usually still pick it back up in time to make it out of the group fine. So
yeah, they might take a lower bracket run, something silly. You know, they'll lose an upper bracket game to an
It'll
Eternal
be
Fire or
like
someone, but that's not too bothersome. Here we're just picking to get out of the group. The playoffs will be an entirely different conversation, and especially because they play the first group, they've just got to make it out the group. Then they've got like 3 weeks to play online events, play minor cups, actually chill before let's play Pro League playoffs. So I think that's all right. On the other side of things, you've got a favourite from this group, and it's a team you like to talk about, but now I think is getting a little more exciting.
Oh, I mean, I'm doubling down. I don't care what iteration of this team I pick, but yeah, the roster move that they made is just a significant upgrade. I've gone with VirtusPro, and I think that's very on brand for me. I love Norbert. I love Fit Flame Jame, and now we've got Electronic in Premier, which is I can't believe that this has happened. Like, Cloud9 have pulled out of ESL Pro League ahead of this news, just basically gone, well, yeah, we were actually quite... I saw this interview with the VirtusPro, like, CEO about how they were trying to organize things, how they looked engaged for opportunities. They saw this opportunity for Electronic, they took it, and basically within, like, the span of less than a week, they were able to sign the contracts, get everything moving ahead of the deadline for ESL Pro League. And so Cloud9 were looking at this opportunity, just going, okay, we're going to sell Electronic, and the replacement. Oh right, shit, we're at this event, huh? And they haven't got anybody. I actually don't understand how they've allowed this transfer to happen and then not found something to get them into the event. This is highly absurd. But they replaced the worst performing player on VirtusPro. And I mean worst performing not because of his roles, not because of his... Honestly, even his inability to frag. The guy just felt a little lost. Mir was not very good at reading his position on the map or what he was supposed to do. I think I saw Bubsky tweet something along the lines of, like, Mir had star roles. And I don't necessarily agree. I think you have to make this distinction between being in a star role and being in an impact role. I think Mir was in an impact role. And the distinction I'll make here is when you're a star, you're given support. You're set up for success. An impact role is more independent. You know, you're making a play, you're closing rounds. These are the types of spots that Mir found himself in frequently. Like, if they lost one of their extremities players, Mir is the guy. And now you have Electronic in that spot, where he has never struggled to find impact. He has never struggled to make those types of plays, and he's never really struggled to close either. This is a hands-down upgrade outside of how the philosophies might differ between the Blade calling and James calling and what Electronic is comfortable with. They're going to give him space to operate in those mid-late rounds, and that's where this team are just going to add an extra layer that is going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah, if your biggest concern is, can Electronic adapt to James' system? I think you've got a great move there, because that's always an what if. How can this player, like, is he going to be able to repress his individuality? Bloody hell, that word's hard to get out. When you're playing with James, can you be a pawn in his system? It's Electronic. He's been a pawn, he's been a rook, he's been a queen, he's been everything in one of the strictest systems. He's also played in the looser iterations of that system towards the end. I don't have any worries about Electronic integrating. Sure, and there might be an event where they have a slow start, like this one, and it takes a second or two just to get familiar with each other, but I'm not worried about Electronic fitting in at all. And you say, like, the roles he's taking over from me, if he does just slip straight into his roles and doesn't start bumping Flit off of positions. Closing, some people might have forgotten, because Electronic has been a player, you know, he's a lot of the time been talked about more of on the opening side of things. That's famously what people remember him as. The first Electronic highlight everyone became aware of is basically a 1v3 or 1v4 on the Mirage A bomb site whilst playing for Flipside. And this is like in overtime, he's already got like 30 kills and he drops like 4 more, just all headshots. He can play in a post play, he can play a late round, he can do everything on a Counter-Strike server that a rifler should be able to do. And even if he's not doing it at his highest level, his lowest level is better than what Mir gave you on this VirtusPro side. So I'm not worried about that at all. I did tweet out, essentially, I believe this is like the new super team. Like Electronic's the second attempt, essentially, at making one in pretty much as many years. And I got a weird feeling this should work. Because as I said, there's none of the problems you had on Cloud9. Your IGL's not him. Your IGL's really good. And you actually have an AWPer. Sure, it's all the same guy solving the problems, but damn it, it's that simple. If you don't have these problems holding you back, you're typically going to be a very good Counter-Strike team. So upgrading the firepower just makes them not unbeatable, but immediately propelled from fake contender, pretender, to legitimately one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah, the big problem with Cloud9 is that they didn't have clear roles defined, basically, on the transition. But now Electronic is entering a very role-defined VirtusPro. Like, Norbert is your entry space taker, and the second in on any of those attempts, Fame, Flit, James. those are very frequently how rounds sort of operate. Like Norbert opens, these other guys finish rounds. And you've just added another player that is excellent at doing exactly that. So, you'd maybe want Flit, Jame, Electronic in that hierarchy. Maybe even actually Jame, Electronic, Flit, if I had to put them in order of like who you'd want to close around. Fame and Norbert are lower down the list, but they can also do it. So yeah, I think this team has a lot of depth. And yeah, people are catching up. I think there's been a lot of punditry that's been very negative about VirtusPro for a very long time, but with this move, a lot of people, I mean, this is too big to ignore, basically. This is actually too big a change where you're bringing in a multi-major winning player and probably one of the most consistent riflers we've had in the past decade, now on a team that have been very consistent through many varied iterations. Never really big champions aside from winning their major. And what, ESL Challenger Rotterdam, was it? I believe Rotterdam. Yeah. Before the major, those are the biggest trophies we've seen VirtusPro lift as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I'm really excited to see this team. Maybe this event starts slow, but for the rest of the year, like I'd be very doubtful they'd make any large or any big significant changes, because everyone else is probably one of the top 5 or 10 players that you would have in their roles.
Yeah, if you extend to 10, I think it probably works, because Fame, as much as I do and appreciate him as a player, probably isn't top 5 in his role. But yeah, Flit, Norbert, hard to say no. Jame, maybe you can name 5 AWPers right now, but you can't name 5 IGLs.
Game leaders, yeah.
And you can't name 5 IGLs who have as much impact on the actual fragging and winning of rounds as him. So yeah, 100% agreed. And I was a pundit who was very happy to not pick them to win things, call them fake pretenders, ask you who have they beaten, and be right every single time. But now even I would be happy with this pick. Obviously, I think FaZe is still the better pick for right now. But yeah, that's a really solid pick. Now moving away from the solid picks, because obviously this show would be very boring if we only talked about favourites. I need an underdog. And I'm going to be honest, when we did our picks, there weren't many good choices. This group is stacked, and we were very limited on the underdogs. We didn't do it like, split the group in half. No, we split the entire field in half, and then went, okay, Group A, who's available? So there were 3 underdog picks in this group, if I'm not going crazy.
Yeah, and I think I got the first pick of the underdogs in this group.
You did.
So I kind of pushed you further out.
I had 2 choices, essentially, 3D Max and Fnatic. And I picked the team I know the most players on. Like, the team I'm rooting for the most, essentially. I took Fnatic. Not that I don't root for 3D Max. They are a French team, I'll always be rooting for the French scene. I need to, otherwise they'd take my passport back. I checked, that's in the terms and conditions. But man, this Fnatic roster is a team I really want to succeed. I don't think they're particularly well built to do it. And I think they've got pieces, like, not necessarily in the team itself, but like in terms of the infrastructure around them and how you're supposed to assemble a team like this that just don't make much sense to me. But QB is a star in the making. Matisse has incredible potential when he's properly set up in a system that makes sense. And the supporting cast around them has been solid at times. I just have problems with things like, Afro and his thinking, or lack thereof sometimes. I have problems with, like, Crims living on, essentially, borrowed time. Like, we can only keep saying, he's a rock for so long before we actually have to, see him do something other than sink to the bottom, because he just hasn't actually been that performant on this Fnatic roster, in my eyes. And Body as a caller isn't bad, and this is probably the right style of calling you want in this roster. But with so many players they've signed that are so inexperienced, so young, it seems like they're lacking a bit of leadership. Like someone who could bring the team together, a core of players from a similar country to share a culture, something like that. As it is, they just seem very scatterbrained in the way they were assembled. I do think their top-end talent is high enough that I value them over 3D Max. But man, this was a bottom-of-the-barrel like scrape when I had to pick this team. And I'm not too happy with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally reasonable. I think Fnatic have obviously gone through a bit of a metamorphosis of, we're content just being around where we are, and now they're taking a few more risks, and, these risks are well, risky. Not all of them are going to work out.
Yeah.
I do think I almost wish someone like maybe Olaf or I don't know, Pronax. Like if I was going to think about old legacy players from Fnatic that had been retained up until now, I would want someone aside from Crims. Like he doesn't give me leadership or like, captain elements from what I've seen from him. He just seems like a laid back dude that does his job, chill, and very easy to work with. But I almost feel like you needed a veteran leader on this team to make it work. Like someone that can keep your in-game leaders in check, someone that can keep these younger players also head screwed on straight, nobody losing their cool. Like Kita as a coach, I think is more on the tactical side than in the interpersonal side as well. So I think, I do worry that this team just kind of lacks that inherent, almost like father figure to a certain degree. Because when you're bringing in young guys, you have to have the experience to sort of counterbalance it. And they have that in Crims, but it doesn't feel like he'll be the most forthcoming in that regard.
Just being 8 years older isn't enough. Yeah, it's not just a matter of being older than them that makes it work. And it's also another case of, I had this problem with NIP. If you're going to sign teenagers and your idea is to not win now, sign only teenagers. Be an academy side. Like, especially one that can give their team such incredible opportunities, like playing in Pro League twice a year, but also you could also go and enter all these cups and not be too bothered about not ever qualifying for Katowice. You don't care, you're the academy side. That would be a great strategy, but no, instead we've kind of got an in-between, and it's just, I think it leads to a dodgy timeline. Like there's no clear path set for them if that was their ambition. So if you're assembling to win now, this just ain't it. That's just not it. So very unconfident in my pick. Very disappointed. But to be fair, yeah, you took the only pick that I could have justified to myself. So what could I do?
Yeah, well, as I was talking through Group A before, I went with Seoul on my underdogs because, well, they're probably the best looking group, best looking team that just barely qualify for being an underdog as well within this group. They came in with some really solid form, made it through the Blast Showdown, which was a massive surprise. Made it to the major as well as the first Portuguese squad to do it. I think these guys are riding a bit of a high, and even though if you look at some of their domestic competition, they have been winning, I think, more and more ever since making it to the major. Even in their online officials, it just felt as though after accomplishing that initial goal, they've just been playing great online Counter-Strike as well. Like, they've always been a bit tumultuous, a bit up and down. They'll lose to For the Win, which they plucked most of their players from as like a bedroom organization within Portugal. And they've, for them to lose domestic matchups like that when they know they've got the better firepower is very unusual and probably very upsetting. But even with all of that, I think the fact that they've been able to turn that corner with again, some veterans on the team, like Roman and Muteris have been around the Portuguese scene for so long. And them basically fielding in that core that were on For the Win that made in the ESL Pro League previously. For me, this team has some great like young players that are aggressive. But then you've got Roman, Arozdos, even Muteris that can like clutch up rounds for you. And Story, I think I've said this before, but anytime a round looks like it's not developing the right way from the initial call, Story always finds a kill back. So I don't know how or when he's going to do it, but in the last like 40-30 seconds of a round, he'll just find a kill and the round is on. So he puts them in a lot of potentially winning positions, and I think that's enough of a threat when you've got other teams that sometimes struggle in that sort of late round. They get a little comfortable when they find an advantage sometimes.
Yeah. I get what you mean about that. And Sora just a team that I can't ever fully write off. And that's the reason I would have liked to have them here. They're a team who just, no matter what you've done, like to them, no matter how you expect them to play coming into it, they've always got a chance to pull something out just because they are a team that have great synergy, well constructed, and have players who are not elite talents, but talented enough to make something happen. And I think that's always going to be a dangerous combination. At the major, yeah, making the major was kind of the goal for them. And the fact that they went out in 3 straight BO3s without really impressing anyone was a bit disappointing. Especially when you think, oh, you had Furia in a 2-2 game. Yeah. That's a game you could win, right? It's Furia. But that's, a shame. They still got, for their org, huge amounts of sticker money. Secured their spot, I guess, for a little while. And so they can go play Challenger League and actually make it through Season 47, I believe. Or at least they've making it deep, because that thing goes on forever.
Yeah.
And, keep playing these online events and get invited to Pro League when someone drops out. It created a lot of opportunity for them. And that's great. I still think they're not going to have a sniff at making out this group. I don't think, even though they're the best underdog team that we could pick, I don't think they've got a sniff. They've not got a chance in hell. Because the rest of the group is so incredibly stacked. I mean, we haven't even mentioned, what's it, like 3 other favourite teams, technically, who are in the top half of the seeding. Like, it's actually insane how many teams in this group are actually really good.
So, like, when we were doing our picks, I was like, I'm just going to make a graphic for myself so that it's easier to understand. There are five classed favorites, or 5 teams within the top 16 seeding based on HLTV in Group A. And the other groups, Group B, 4. Group C, 4. And Group D, 3. Like, if we're thinking about it from that perspective, Group A is the most stacked. So, yeah, it's a very thin group to pick from for the underdogs in particular.
It'd be nice. Usually when you look at a group like this, you're like, oh, Eternal Fire, great underdog pick. No, they're like number 7 in the world. They've been on such a heater. They've been such a great underdog. They're no longer an underdog. A team like Imperial, even. Who would have thought Imperial would be 18th in the world, 1 space behind Liquid, after one of the most impressive major stages they could have ever hoped for. No one was expecting them to do this much. And so here they are, 18 in the world, and not available for us to pick. It does mean that they're kind of paper favourites. They're not going to be actually that dangerous. But still, if they can bring out the form they had at the major, SAW are going to get stuffed. So really hard to pick an underdog and have serious belief in them. But I think Group B had some slightly better choices. And had some equally impressive favourites to talk about. So I think it's time we move on. And I actually did end up picking my Group B favourite pretty early on. So I was able to lock in as my first pick Vitality. A roster who, it must be said, disappointed at the major. Finishing top 4 mustn't feel like a disappointment to most people. But considering their quarterfinal opponent was Cloud9, you look at the scalps they actually took in the end, you're like, it actually wasn't that crazy. They're not actually that hot. And the ZywOo form issue never resolved itself. So maybe his sickness did carry on into the playoffs, and that was kind of the problem that they had to continue to deal with. But it was kind of a narrative that we built to try and reassure ourselves that Vitality was still one of the elite teams. It's like, ZywOo's sick. That's been the issue. They've not been able to prac, someone said. Seems a bit weird to me, because don't have to be sat next to each other to do some prac, but it's fine, it's whatever. It's a different feeling. I still think at this event, surely, he can't be what? He can't have what's that thing kids died of in the Victorian times? Tuberculosis. He's not going to be sick for 8 months and then drop dead, is he? He's going to be fine now. I can't. He's been in Malta, I'm sure, ahead of the event, taking in some sun, the natural healing power of the universe, the sun.
But is it too much sun? What if he has heat stroke now?
Heat stroke or some bollocks. I'd be so annoyed. But surely he can't manage that. This should be Vitality playing, honestly, with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. Because they're like, what the fuck? We made it to the semis of the major without ZywOo, essentially, with Spinks, Flames having to do a lot more of the heavy lifting. That should have been our major. We could have played Na'Vi with their 49% round win rate in the final. We blew that. So they're going to be fired up. ZywOo's going to be healthy. Fucking better be, mate. And I think they're going to just cruise out this group. They're going to stomp everyone in their path. Maybe if they have to face G2 in a seeding game, some of the fire burns out. But aside from that, very excited for this Vitality team to make a fierce comeback. Not just a comeback, but comeback with a vengeance.
Yeah, I think the most impressive part about them at the major was the fact, like you said, it wasn't about ZywOo, but it was the fact as well that they adapted to the scenario that they were in. Like, ZywOo's not feeling great. Other people have to take responsibilities. They have to take greater space or risks or opening fights. And Flames of Spinks delivered on exactly that. I feel like those guys were major propellants, and it probably helped inspire a little bit more confidence in their own individual form, because that's been something that's been a bit tenuous at times for both the Israeli players on this Vitality roster, especially players like Flames, who, came in as one of the star players of his previous rosters and basically couldn't find that sort of replication, even in potential multi-fragging opportunities. He just doesn't find them as consistently. So I think for both of them, that's probably a very big boon that they, stepped into different roles or stepped into different responsibilities. And that can be weirdly another threat for Vitality should they start to lean away from, ZywOo having to be almost like an opener, closer, everything player for this team. They might even be able to allow ZywOo to play more late round scenarios, which is something that they've strayed away from very significantly over Vitality's development. Like, you try to remember how many times we'd see ZywOo in clutches and how many times he'd absolutely blow people out of the water. I can't say I've seen that as much in the past 2 years, which is absurd considering how good he is in clutches. But he'll still come away with a round or two every so often, just not to the same degree. So yeah, I think Vitality will have everything in order by the time they get to Pro League. I have to hope that they have straightened out some issues and they've maybe even discussed the fact that they can be a bit more diverse in the way that they want to play because of that.
Yeah, more prongs to the attack. That's always a good thing to have. Just more options, more ways to do things. I think making themselves a little more unpredictable, that'd be very impressive. Oh, very effective, probably. Yourself, there's another clear favourite in this group. And you've made no mistake, you've picked them.
Yeah,
I've already named them.
I went for G2. And this is not the team I thought I would be picking, I'll be honest.
Really?
Well, given the favorites within this group, there's Falcons, the Mongols, Vitality, and G2. Yes, G2 are the team I thought I would be picking within this group, with with the scope of who else is favorites. But yeah, G2 are in a weird place for me. I kind of don't know how to place them because I feel like so much of it is so reliant on m0NESY. And that's kind of it. Like, I'm getting good enough output out of Nico. But Hunter and Nexa, I don't know what to make of these two. Like, HooXi, I'll excuse, actually, to a certain degree. This guy is calling. He had probably the lowest skill level of any of the players on this roster before joining. And so, when he first joined, everybody's eye test was like, what, this guy's bad. And they weren't wrong. He was bad. No. But he is much better than he was before, and he is putting up comparable or similar amounts of impact as Hunter and Nexa. While in-game leading, while being the lowest skill floor player on this team, somehow he is right there with them. So I don't know what to think about G2. They could come out crazy. They could honestly fly straight through this group, for all I know. But then if they bottomed out, I also wouldn't be incredibly surprised. So yeah, they're in this weird flux place for me, where they're like the Schrodinger's team, where they're either the best or they don't exist, and I don't know until I open the box.
Yeah, you never really know. And one thing I never thought I would describe Nico as is inconsistent, especially not on this extreme. Because he's had series of late where he's just absent, entirely absent. And for a player of his quality and usual impact, that cannot be allowed. And m0NESY has done a great job of keeping them relevant single-handedly. But I don't think that's going to be enough to really rely on long term. Is it enough to get you out of Group B at the ESL Pro League? Yeah, probably. Fair enough. m0NESY is that good. He is in contention for the best player in the world. And if it wasn't for the fact that Donk was Counter-Strike Jesus until the end of February, Yeah, he probably would be considered comfortably the best player in the world right now. So I think G2 have perhaps the best opportunity to be an era-defining team, but have made so many mistakes and have found so many terrible moments to be inconsistent that they haven't. I mean, they could have been major finalists if JL doesn't have the craziest CT half of Ancient I've seen any man play ever. Ever. There's no two ways about it. Like, I've seen, there's an old FPX, Fun Plus Phoenix game where, Madden had a T side that was pretty redonkulous on a similar level. But on CT side, I can't remember anyone doing this outside of a pug. This was dumb. And watching it in the stadium, it was like me and my friend sat there. The round would finish, new round, and we think, oh, this is going wrong. G2 have this round. There's no way JL can win this round. Look up at the big screen, bang, headshot, somehow gets a third one, and you just think, this is absurd. This is rigged. How are we supposed to beat this guy? If I'm his opponent, what is going on? I've never seen JL play like that outside of this event, because he had a nuke game where he did pretty much the same thing to someone else. Can't remember who actually now off the top of my head, but I'm sure it was their quarterfinal matchup or something like that. It was the most absurd game of Counter-Strike I'd seen anyone play an Ancient. And so that was a 13-11. It took JL pulling off Herculean heroics to beat G2 13-11. They could have been major finalists, despite us saying Nexa, Hooksy, and Hunter have all been very underwhelming, despite Nico being inconsistent, having 1.6 maps and then maps where he basically isn't touching his mouse and keyboard. That's the level of this m0NESY carry. And yet, they're still going to be frustratingly unpredictable at this event. They should be a lock. They could still go out last. It's been kind of the G2 way for far too long now. I mean, I think with JKS they avoided it mostly, but before JKS they used to do this as well. Like Pro League groups 1 and 4 sort of thing, or 1 and 5. They used to be very capable of it still. I hate the fact that it's a thing now. Oh god, this G2 pick better come out.
Yeah, I just don't know. I just don't know. I picked them. I hope they do well, and I hope they do somehow get a handle on their inconsistencies. But they're a very weird team right now. Is I think how I would class them. Even their biggest analyst fans are calling for heads, but they have been for a while. So
well, they've been calling for one head forever.
Yes,
pretty much the moment he signed for the team, people have been calling for Hooksy's head. But I think you'd be justified calling for 3 heads at least at this point.
Yeah, but we're even calling for Hunter. What is why is he playing scenarios this way? You know, if I'm thinking about some of the what was that? There was that big clip circulating about Nexa trolling on his comms a long time. When they first got picked up, Nexa lost a 1v1 on Inferno, a bomb site, and they lose the round because they're all out hunting or something. You know, they're all involved. You know, everybody, all of them are involved. And I feel like this team has only somehow, at the early days of Nexa, that could be excused. You know, things are a little bit turbulent and a little bit unusual, but they needed to have fixed it by now. So I can only hope that Pro League is somehow therapeutic for them.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so. And speaking of teams that kind of need this event to go right for them, you've had potential, you've had downs, but I think have made a good signing and are now basically looking to trend back up again. It's my first underdog pick. It's M80. Now, I always want this team to succeed because I picked MabsMD as a prospect a long time ago. At the time, I considered him, mechanically, one of the most impressive players I'd ever watched. And I thought, there's no way this guy can fail. Well, except for the fact that he's Guatemalan and can't seem to find a good team to play for, which is one of the limiting factors of all South American youngsters. This M80 squad, he has been able to find not only his numbers, but a fair bit of actual winning play. They've been consistently pretty much the 3rd or 4th best team in North America for, well, ever since they assembled this version, or this team under the brand M80. And they've been impressive. Now, things kind of hit the fan when they lost Manx right before the major. And that kind of ruined things because Def had to come standing in. And even though MD had great performances, Rec had some really good maps, they couldn't quite make it work. They couldn't qualify.
Even Def looked fine actually at that
Def
event,
didn't
which
play
was
that badly.
yeah.
That's fair enough as well. But even despite some good performances from some players, it was a brutal Americas qualifier. They lost. They went 2-2 and went home, which it's a bit silly. But hey, you lost the BO3 to Legacy. Probably the right outcome, to be honest. At this event, they are now going to be playing with Sin, who technically he's only played 2 maps with them. He's been on the team 22 days. They've won both of those maps, if I'm not going crazy. And yeah, they have won both of those
both
maps.
against Take Flight, yeah.
Yeah, against garbage. But they won it. It's about embedding, feeling comfortable, getting to know each other. Sin dropped some crazy ratings. I put 0 stock in that. I'm not going to pretend I do. Come on,
they 30-0'd them on one map. Man.
They did. He's a European playing in NA against one of the worst NA teams you can play. Sure, they're empty numbers, but it's all about comfort. It's all about harmony. And I think they need this event to relaunch themselves, get back into the swing of things, reintegrate a new European to make this team, good. I'm still a believer in Swisher and Rec as solid NA players. I've had my problems with Slacks in the past as an EU tier 3 farmer. Hooks up great numbers against nobodies, but the moment he's facing a good team, he gets passive, he misses the easy shots, he's not impactful. He's had a lot less of that as a part of this team. Sure, there's not as many big games to play when you're a part of M80, but the few he has played in, he hasn't looked as scared, and that's been important. So there's enough talent on this team to make a run. Was there a better pick? We'll get into the other pick that some would argue is better, because I have my own critiques for them. I think M80, their talent, their fight, because they showed a lot of fight at that America's RMR. I think that could carry them through and make an upset run. Unlikely, perhaps. Far from impossible.
Yeah, big fan of Malbs. English speaking. I mean, very humble seeming guy, considering he's basically the only relevant Guatemalan player ever.
Well, with good reason. It's not exactly a big country, is it? It's tiny.
No, it's not. But like you said, he struggled to find a team for a long time. Very high output player, and still does that for this team. And I think Rec and Swisher do enough. I think it's a bit strange, the game that they played with Sin, they were playing with Stamina, I think, as well, in place of Slacks. So Stamina's M80's analyst, but was a AWPer in-game leader type.
Oh, he was, yes.
Yeah. So a little peculiar, a little strange, but even then the games were so one-sided that there's kind of not a lot of if I'm thinking about Sin and what he's supposed to provide for this team, he is supposed to be a closer mid-round player, not so much an opener, not so much on the front-facing side of things. And if the games are one-sided, that's usually because your front pack is winning the round for you. Very infrequently is it sort of placed solely on your shoulders as a late round player. So I haven't seen enough to know whether or not he's going to do well on this team. I haven't seen him with the full roster either, so I'm a little perplexed.
There's a lot of question marks, yeah.
Yeah, but I'd remain hopeful as well. I would like another relevant North American team, especially one that is venturing outside of just the typical run-of-the-mill North American players that circulate in the scene and just constantly recycling. And they've tried to go for something different, and I can appreciate that a lot. So when this team was first announced, I thought they would be a slam dunk straight away, but they've undergone some difficulties for sure.
They have, and to be honest, they've been one of the most successful NA projects to come out of the country for the last 4 years. Aside from the big teams, no one else has been consistently able to go to European events, not look shit at European events, play well in qualifiers, play well against Brazilian sides. No one else really does that who's not a big name in that region. So it's them. More recently, Wildcard have kind of joined, that core have joined that sort of tier of play. But they've been impressive. So I think it's a quality project. That's the best way to describe it.
A quality project, but it's all about how far their ambition can actually take them, unfortunately. And I've gone for another project piece. Nafany's Redemption Squad. BetBoom in Group B. And listen, they honestly, when they first formed, very surprising how well they were doing. I've kind of tanked since then. Haven't been able to qualify to as many events. Haven't been able to, I guess, fight at that level of competition consistently enough. But they have made a roster move recently. They have signed Magnoyez. I don't know how you say that with, how he intends you to say that, but we can call him Mango Man for now.
Just call him Mayonnaise, mate. I'm pretty sure that's what his name translates to. It's just.
Is it actually what it translates?
I'm pretty sure it's just mayonnaise.
There's no shot that that's what that translates to. I need to know now.
Mayonnaise.
Oh, no, okay. They also say mayonnaise. It's not manoyez, but still. That's what I just look at it and think, how is his name not just mayonnaise?
Okay, well, Mango Man, Magnojez. They signed this man who, there was a lot of hype circulating around him, basically because Donk was so good, and then they were like, wait, look at the academy squad now. They've replaced Donk, and this guy has similar numbers. He's also the highest player in FPL, and he won some months or whatever of FPL. Meanwhile, he was duo queued with Donk the entire time. And also, the academy leagues and the places they're playing aren't really as, they're not the same level of competition. Like, this guy, we watch him, I test, ain't the same guy. Let's not confuse this. However, he is a good player, like a solid young player, 19 years old, good run, shoot head. I think a lot more more thought out than Donk ever was. That's a part of the game that Donk has developed in quite significantly, but I feel like Magnoyez was ahead of him considerably. I'd say he's closer to like a Zontix type player than Donk, really. And I think that's perfect for what BetBoom are. Like, if we think about this BetBoom roster, they've got a lot of aggressive players. Like, Nafany, traditionally aggressive. Zorte, I guess, developed a little bit into an aggressive player. Siren was always second fiddle to that. Chiron, entry fragger.
Uber aggressive.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking, these guys love to run in and fight people, and I want somebody like a Magnoyez behind them. So I'm actually I approve a lot of this roster move. I think the way that they've played so far since integrating him has been pretty solid overall. So yeah, I'm willing to give him a shot. I'm willing to give BetBoom another chance at it. It is a shame that Cloud9 aren't at this event, replaced by Soul, of course. But it is what it is.
So here's the problem. I watched Mayonnaise in K23 for a long time. Before he actually went to the academy, he was first in an actual like tier 2/3 team with players like Hegev, I think with Ryujin at one point, some other names you may have heard of if you watch way too much tier 2 CS. I was never particularly impressed. And he was playing more like a Danitz style player at the time. And then he goes to Spirit Academy, does get thrust into those forward roles, very aggressive, takes all the openings, has massive impact stats. And I thought when he signs for BetBoom, I was like, oh, they've added another guy who does that? Like, are they signed him for that? And I was hoping they didn't, because that would make no sense to me. They've already got Chiron, they've already got Nafany. It doesn't make much sense to add more of that. By the numbers, they kind of have been using him. He's taken 30% of their opening attempts on CT side. He's doing way too much aggressive stuff for my liking. But at the same time, he's getting massive stats, and the team has won more than they've lost with him. So you can say there's some positives to it, but I still don't agree with this move entirely. Just on that basis, that they've brought him in to again take early fights. Another guy who's going to be trying to hit heads to open up rounds. Because, of course, Nafany is dominating. He calls around himself. He takes like 31% of their T-side openers. But then the next two guys, I'd expect Chiron to be up there with him. He's not. He's even with Mayonnaise at like 21. And that just seems so silly. Like, why are we doing this? I know Zorti hasn't looked as sharp as he did when the team first came together. But I still want him more involved in my T side. He's at his best when he's more involved in the opening attempts. When he's more involved in finding aggressive pathways. They haven't really done that. Instead, they've tried to go to a full rifle approach. doesn't really vibe with me. I don't think it meshes with the talent they have. Now, that being said, they're still really dangerous. You can say what you want about Nafany's style of calling and how it puts a cap on you and you're boom or bust. They still can boom, though, and that's going to be a problem. If you're in Group B, you've got to be scared of playing BetBoom. Now, their best of one opener, is it best of 3 opener? Their opening match, whatever it is.
Best of 1, it should be, I think.
Yeah, is against M80. No, it's a best of 3. So their best of 3 opener is against M80. So they've got honestly, at that point, they even got a firepower, pretty, good matchup. In terms of calling, sure, there's a lot of critiques to give of Nafany, but he's had more time with his player, he's been able to call wins before. I think the M80 game's a really good one for him to get into that upper bracket, so this team could be a very dangerous underdog. More dangerous than anyone really expects. So I'm actually kind of worried, because whilst I do think personally, if I had to put money on it, they'll go straight out. There's a very good chance they go through, just on the back of their individuals being so skilled.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, who do you have close rounds for you? Who would you want in a clutch?
Who would I want on this team in a clutch?
It's probably
no one, honestly.
Yeah,
I don't think they have a closer.
That's kind of my point. Is that I've mainly watched FPL demos of him when he was doing good with Dong. I've not. Yeah. I guess I haven't in-eyed looked at his games, but he seemed way more thought out and less aggressive. And I don't know.
Is basically he allowed to think on this team though?
I don't know. I would want basically either him or Zorte in a clutch. If I had to pick anybody on this team, those are the 2 I'm going with. And that's kind of how I think his strength should play into this team. Now, whether or not it's going to be utilized that way, whether or not they're just aggro defaulting or just going for a very fast execute where everyone's just trying to rip heads, I don't really know. Because that was the main criticism of Nafany's calling before, is that they would never do executes ever. But BetBoom do executes. They just go usually with fast and aggressive ones, or burst style executes. It's whatever. It's a different look. It's a different style. It's a different team. Yeah, I think that opening round matchup is favorable for them. And then in the upper semifinal, when they play Sharks.
Oh yes, when Sharks upset.
Yes.
In the opening best of 3 against Vitality. Yes, carried by Doc, RDNZAO, Togs, Suplexney, and DRG.
Have you seen Zaiwu get suplexed? I haven't, but I'm willing to watch that wrestling final.
Yeah, they're not going to play Sharks. They're going to play Vitality, and even if they do in their opening, they should, at that point, just go tumbling down the stairs and straight out the bottom. But it's not impossible. That's what I'm saying. It's unthinkable to me that M80 wins the opening one and then goes against Vitality and somehow wins 2 maps. This group of cracked children, essentially from Eastern Europe, is generally the formula. Could just go in and win 2 maps against Vitality. If they come in on enough of a heater, they get to play Mirage and something else. I don't know what the other map is. I've not been watching them with Mainers 2 specifically recently. But they've got that edge to them that could make it work.
I mean, this is also the biggest event that BetBoom are going to be playing for the foreseeable future. If I think about
BetBoom, Daha, whatever the hell comes next, could be $1 million prize pool, and that's huge according to the Valve ranking.
That could definitely happen. But I mean, if I think about some of the other teams in here, Falcons, for example, they're actually. Well, actually, I'm looking at the BetBoom Daha thing, and guess what? BetBoom ain't in it. It's
well, they're not in the next one.
They're not in the next one. We've got Mal, Spirit, Cloud9, Heroic, VP Falcons, Aurora, MIBR.
Their own open They played a close qualifier for it, and they finished 3rd. Only first place went through. Oh wow!
It's a brutal life out here. Anyway, they're not even at their own event. But Falcons have Pro League, Belgrade, Dallas, Jönköping, last 4 groups.
Yeah.
This BetBoom team have nothing. If there's one team within this group that I think should be treating it the most serious, in terms of legitimacy, Nafany needs to do well. in terms of, even these other players that have been tertiary, tier 2 quality players, but I mean, not tertiary, but on the cusp tier 2 players where they've been on rosters that could have threatened some of these top level teams, but have never been able to push it forward. Like, I think Chiron's maybe the one exception. Yeah, Chiron and Magnolia, so I guess are the newer, less experienced players in that regard. But for them, like, this is about staking a claim. If you want to be touted as one of these high prospect players, especially when you see players like Monacy, Donk taking a lot of the attention, like young guys from your region that are cracked as. Like, if you want to be one of those guys, you have to show it at an event when you get an opportunity like this. The only reason people talk about Donk now coming into this year, when other pundits, you and I included, would have looked at Donk even before they had those types of top level opportunities at Katowice, we saw him as incredible. Like, you see that eye test, you see all that the greatness that could be, you see what you kind of predict to a certain extent that Katowice is going to play that way. But for these guys, no one's talking about them in that same regard. They have had more of an opportunity. They've had more chances. But this project, in terms of the philosophy of what it's supposed to be, these guys are supposed to redeem themselves from some of the past failings of previous projects. So they should treat it the most seriously out of literally anybody in this group, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair
They'll have
point.
the most hunger.
They should be fired up and hungry. So we'll see how they come into it. Again, that opening game, great opportunity to win on the board. And then in that upper bracket, it's not unthinkable. They just need to be that fired up and, or as you put it, that hungry. And I mean, Zywoo's a big man. It's a lot to eat, but you got to be real hungry.
I hope he's ready to eat some mango. Mango and mayonnaise.
Oh, what a combo.
Disgusting, actually.
Yeah, don't worry. I figured that one out myself. Oh, but man. Yeah, it should be a cracking pair of groups, no matter what.
I just hope we get some of them right this time.
Let's hope we get some points right. Let's hope the viewers, who I don't think I did the viewer predictions for the playoffs. I think I forgot that before I went off on holiday. Holiday to Copenhagen to lose all my money because bloody hell, that city's expensive. So I think the viewers did get some free points there. I didn't give you all the free points because I know you lot would have voted for Spirit, and so haha, suck it. But yeah, you did get some free points without having to put any effort in, and I hope this event you screw it up. That'll be funny. But yeah, man, let's wrap this up. I'm not sure anyone can tell, my voice is, of course, dying as it does on every episode of every show I do. It's useless. I need to go see a vocal coach for this, like learn how to use my diaphragm all the pros keep talking about.
Just don't stop talking for the rest of, even when you're not doing podcasts, just waffle. That's what I do. It's helped.
You see, I have one of those jobs where you actually do stuff. You don't just sit on meetings and chat. And I can't just waffle unless I'm talking to myself. And I'm not that interesting that I'd want to talk to myself, I don't find. So it is what it is. I'll just keep running out of vocal stamina and crying about it every night. So that, yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like. Tell us in the comments why we're wrong and why you're a genius. I know some people have no qualms about doing it, and I am honestly I'm there for it. I love being corrected in the comments, and I love it even more when you end up being wrong. So vote in the poll that's coming out. This video will be up Thursday evening, Thursday morning for members. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.